antenna reception from every angle. Again, fully automated testing, where we're testing the reception in free space. Here's our biggest room right here. Again, you have to build these rooms because if you don't shield what you're testing from all of the outside interference, you don't get accurate tests. And you can't put your equipment in the room either. The equipment's got to all be remoted outside the room. Now, this is a state-of-the-art antenna test facility. We have 17 anechoic chambers. These things are not cheap. We've invested over $100 million in our antenna testing facilities over the last 5 years. We have 18 PhD scientists and engineers on a much larger staff, but 18 PhD scientists and engineers working in this area, and they do some very advanced antenna design. And so the iPhone antenna went through all of this. We tested it. We knew that if you gripped it in a certain way, the bars are going to go down a little bit, just like every smartphone. We didn't think it'd be a big problem, because every smartphone has this issue. So phones aren't perfect, and it's a challenge for the entire industry, and we're hoping to make some contributions to this in future years. As a matter of fact, we think we've started with this antenna, which is a more advanced antenna than ever has shipped on a smartphone before. People are reporting better reception with this antenna than they've ever seen with their smartphones before. So, what have we learned? The first thing we've learned is smartphones have weak spots. This is not unique to iPhone 4. This is a property of smartphones. They have weak spots. You can grab them in the course of normal use, and they're all different, but you will drop reception. Next, some really interesting data from AppleCare. As you know, we get very high marks in terms of customer service. Our customer service program is called AppleCare. Whenever anyone calls in for a problem, in addition to solving their problem, they're logged. We look at the statistics, and we've got the statistics on AppleCare. And we asked ourselves, what's the percent of all iPhone 4 users who have called AppleCare about issues relating anything about the antenna or reception, or anything even near antenna or reception? In other words, if you read all these articles out there, you would have thought, Jesus, at least half our customers must have called in to complain or ask questions or be angry, right? So what percent of the iPhone users have called AppleCare? Hard data. 1/2 of 1%. 1/2 of 1%, 0.55%. This data is just a few days old. 0.55%. Historically, for us, this is not a large number. So this doesn't really jive with what you read about this problem. Let's keep going. So smartphones have weaknesses. In AppleCare, about 0.5% of our iPhone 4 users have called in about problems related to reception, antennas, etc. Even after reading all of these articles out there. 0.55%. The third, return rates. Like Apple, AT&T, who is the largest reseller of iPhones in the world, has a, if you will, buyer's remorse return period. And people return phones for all sorts of reasons. The reception in their area isn't what they'd hoped. They try it out, they just don't like it. The antenna doesn't work for them when they grip it a certain way. Whatever it is, no questions asked. They can return a phone, just like it to Apple. And so what are the return rates? Through our largest reseller of iPhone 4s. Well, what we're going to do is compare it to iPhone 3GS. Because iPhone 3GS has been the best-selling smartphone in history. It's the gold standard. So in the early days of iPhone 3GS a year ago, AT&T's return rates were 6%. which is below the smartphone average. And everybody was pretty happy about that. What are they for the iPhone 4? Again, you go online and you read all these articles about it, and you'd think it must be, geez, at least half the people must be returning their phones, right? It's pretty serious. Well, we've got the data now. And the hard data says it's 1.7%. It is less than a third of the return rates for the iPhone 3GS. Hard data, just a few days old. So smartphones have weak spots. About 0.5% of all iPhone owners have called AppleCare about anything related to antennas and reception. And the returns at our largest iPhone 4 reseller are a third of what they were for a phone that was regarded as spectacular a year ago. Okay, pretty interesting. One more data point. AT&T has given us the early call drop rate information just 3 days ago. They obviously run a very sophisticated network. They do a great job. And they log call drops. That helps them improve their network. And so we can't give out the absolute call drop data. That's very confidential and proprietary to them. For competitive reasons, they don't want to give it out. And I totally agree with them. But they're going to let us release the delta to the iPhone 3GS. So how is the call drops, how do call drops on iPhone 4 compare to call drops on iPhone 3GS during its early period, a year ago? How many additional calls are dropped per every 100 calls you make on an iPhone 4 compared to an iPhone 3GS? And I can tell you, since we are being totally transparent, that even though we believe the iPhone 4's antenna is superior to that of the iPhone 3GS, I must report to you that the iPhone 4 drops more calls per 100 than the iPhone 3GS. That's what the data says. We got it 3 days ago. So how many more calls per 100 does the iPhone 4 drop than the iPhone 3GS? Again, listening to AntennaGate on the web, you would think, whoa, it must be dropping half the calls. It must be dropping at least 50 more calls per 100 or 25 more calls per 100. Right? Wouldn't you expect that? This is the hard data. The iPhone 4 drops less than 1 additional call per 100 more than the iPhone 3GS. Less than 1 additional call per 100. Now, even less than 1 is too much for us. We're trying to find out why. We want to drive this lower than the 3GS. But this does put it in perspective. So I have my own pet theory on this, which we have no proof of, but I'll give it to you anyway. When the iPhone 3GS came out, we did not change the design from the iPhone 3. And there was a healthy market of cases for the iPhone 3G that were already in stores that fit the 3GS perfectly since the design didn't change. And in our stores, 80% of the iPhone 3GS users walked out with a case. iPhone 4 has a radically new design. None of the old cases fit. Since we didn't show it to anybody, none of the new cases are ready. And we can't make enough of our bumper cases. And so in our stores, about 20% of the people are going out with a case. And I think that has something to do with this disparity. But who knows? We're going to track it down. But again, zooming out,